Reality is not what physics first thought it was. Reality feels stable. Objects remain where they are. Events follow one another, causes produce effects. This sense of solidity is so deeply ingrained that questioning it feels unnecessary. We move through the world assuming that reality exists fully formed, independent, and complete. Physics began with the same assumption. Early physics treated reality as something that could be described entirely through motion, forces, and positions. If enough variables were known, the future could be predicted. The universe appeared deterministic. Reality was something that happened, and physics was there to record it. This view worked until it didn't. As measurements became more precise, reality stopped behaving as expected. At smaller scales, particles refused to settle into definite states. They did not occupy precise positions. They did not follow single trajectories. They behaved less like objects and more like probabilities. Reality began to blur. This was not a failure of measurement, it was a revelation. Quantum physics did not reveal a hidden layer of tiny objects beneath reality. It revealed that the idea of objects itself may be an approximation. At fundamental levels, what exists is not a thing, but a mathematical description of potential outcomes. Reality became conditional. A particle does not have a position until it is measured. It does not possess a value that exists independently of interaction. Before measurement, the system is described by a wave function, not a physical wave in space, but a mathematical structure encoding possibilities. This is not metaphor. This is how predictions are made. Reality, at this level, is not fully actual, it is structured uncertainty. What becomes real depends on how interaction occurs. Change the measurement, and the outcome changes. Not because reality is subjective, but because it is relational. This forced physics to abandon a deeply comforting idea, that reality exists independently of observation, in a fully defined way. Relativity had already prepared the ground for this shift. Time and space turned out not to be absolute. They depended on motion and gravity. There was no universal present, no single frame of reference that could claim authority. Reality looked different depending on where and how it was observed. Quantum theory went further. It questioned whether reality was complete at all without interaction. Together, these theories dismantled the idea of an objective, fully defined universe existing independently of all frames and measurements. Reality did not disappear, but it became contextual. This does not mean that physics denies reality. It means physics denies simplicity. The universe still exists. Events still occur. Predictions remain extraordinarily accurate. But what exists is not a collection of independent objects with fixed properties. It is a network of relations, interactions, and constraints that only become definite under specific conditions. At large scales, this complexity collapses into stability. Objects appear solid, time flows smoothly. Causes produce effects. The deeper structure disappears behind averages and repetition. Reality becomes familiar again, but familiarity is not fundamentality. At the deepest levels, reality never stops being probabilistic. It never stops being relational. It never stops depending on interaction. Stability is something that emerges, not something that exists from the start. This realization changes what it means to know something. Knowing is no longer about uncovering what already exists in full. It is about understanding the conditions under which something becomes defined. Knowledge becomes conditional, not absolute, accurate, but limited. Physics does not provide a final picture of reality, it provides constraints. It tells us what reality cannot be. It shows us where intuitive models break down. It exposes the boundaries of description. Every successful theory works by carving out a domain where certain assumptions hold, and failing beyond it. This is not weakness, it is discipline. Reality is not obligated to be fully describable. It does not need to fit into language, intuition, or visualization. The universe functions whether it can be pictured or not. Physics adapts to this by becoming more abstract, more mathematical, and more careful. As theories deepen, imagery fades, equations remain. This creates a quiet shift in perspective. Instead of seeking ultimate explanations, physics begins to explore consistency. Instead of asking what is reality made of, it asks what structures can exist without contradiction. Reality becomes less about substance and more about coherence. This shift mirrors something subtle in experience. When attention rests deeply, the sense of a solid world softens. Objects remain, but the assumption of fixedness weakens. Experience becomes fluid, contextual, responsive. Stability reveals itself as habit, not essence. Physics points outward to the same conclusion: reality is not static, it is maintained. Existence is not a completed fact, it is an ongoing process of resolution. Possibilities becoming outcomes, relations becoming structures, uncertainty becoming form. Reality happens continuously, not once. This does not make the universe fragile, it makes it dynamic. The mistake is expecting reality to behave like a finished object. Physics shows that reality behaves more like an unfolding constrained system, stable enough to rely on, subtle enough to resist final capture. There is no final frame, no ultimate description, no complete model. And this is not a problem to be solved, it is a condition to be understood. When physics accepts this, it does not collapse into speculation. It becomes more precise, more honest, more restrained. It stops claiming what it cannot justify. It works with what reality allows. Reality does not need to be fully understood to be real. It does not wait for explanation. It does not pause for certainty. Physics does not explain reality away. It teaches us how to stand in front of it without illusion. And when illusion drops, something remains, not answers, not conclusions, but a clearer relationship with what is still within.